So this video I'm going to be doing quick reviews of the albums I have not gone through. I might just have like a few things to say about it, but I'll be trying to be as clear as I can. This is every album that I was planning on reviewing but didn't quite get to it. So we're going to start off with Holding Absence. So this band I have heard of for about a few years now, but I kind of put off every opportunity to listen to them until this record, and it's fine. I like the ideas. It kind of reminds me of a Stronger Caskets album. They have a similar sound to them, but I feel like where Caskets had a really good debut album, I feel like Holding Absence is being a little bit more consistent in their sound. This album has a lot of good songs from start to finish. I don't think there's really a weak moment. There's some like average songs, and I think a lot of them are just like fine to good, but the first few tracks, like A Crooked Melody, False Dawn, and even some of the last tracks like Liminal are probably some of my favourites. It's a 3 out of 5 for me. Green Lung is one of the new bands that we've had in the scene that released their first album in 2019. We have their third record now, This Heathen Land, and I must say it is great. There is not a dull moment. I just love the energy on this one. For a stoner rock band, they incorporate amazing elements of stoner rock / doom metal into some of these tracks. I really enjoyed just the last few tracks as well from this. I think Oceans of Time is phenomenal, and some of the best tracks probably would be right at the start and right at the end. I would say the only kind of point I slipped off a little bit would be The Ancient Ways. I do like this one, but if it wasn't for Songs of Stone, I think kind of carrying a bit more of a simpler, softer vibe, I wouldn't have really got into that one as much. I think the distinction between the tracks are great. I think there's a lot of great moments. I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's a pretty good album. ALEXANDRIA, Where Do We Go From Here, is an album I was going to talk about, but I never quite had the time to actually do a review, so here's a short review. It's much better than the last two albums. I think Like a House on Fire was awful, and I think See What's on the Other Side was just bearable. But the problems with this album, even if it's got some good songs like Dark Void and Bad Blood, it still is completely mediocre. I think the problem is it's just too mainstreamy, and the band is sometimes labelled as octane core, which I 100% believe because they just sound very generic, and yeah, it's kind of a bit of a letdown. Give it a 2.5 out of 5. It's just, yeah. Next we have the new one by Plain White T's, which is the self-titled album. I thought this is going to be kind of something, refreshing because of the self-titled inclusion, and while I don't really know much about Plain White T's, and I've heard a lot of people say that this is kind of a nice little return to their classic sound, I can't really see it. I don't know. I feel like there's elements into their earlier direction that works a lot better, especially when they're playing with their pop punk sort of sound. But here, this just isn't there. This is like some of the most boring, half-assed stuff I've heard all year. I just find nothing interesting in it. Young Tonight was already an indicator for what was to come, and I think the whole album just did not deliver. It's not very good in my opinion. I'll give it a 1.5 out of 5. Australian punk post-hardcore band REDHOOK released their debut album Postcard from a Living Hell. I've been meaning to talk about this one because I've been following REDHOOK for quite a while now, especially way before their first EP, which I think a lot of people would listen to, the Bad Decisions one back in 2021. This album's good. I like it. I think when you start off with Postcard XO, or Kiss, what XO means, it just literally pulls you in some great ideas. I like the heavier aspect between the artists and ideas, and then I like the softer ones as well. The most iconic song is Low Budget Horror, because this was a single released a while before the album came out, and even I listened to this before I kind of fell off with the band a little bit. Jabberwocky is one of my standout tracks, and I think if you're just looking for a fun album with a lot of energy and just another band that has a really good singer, then yeah, this is definitely one I recommend. I give this a 3.5 out of 5. Next we have the new one by Veil, Maya Mother. I was going to talk about this one, but I must have forgot about it, but here we are. This album's fine. I think what it does well is it adds in some little mathcore elements, which is a nice little addition to their usual heavy metal sound, but the problem, I just don't really vibe with half the songs on here. In terms of stuff like synthwave, vegan, I just think the overall aesthetic just feels a bit meh. There's a lot of stuff that does work, but at the same time you're getting a bunch of songs that don't. I think the singles for this album were pretty lackluster, and the best stuff is stuff like Tokyo Chainsaw, Artificial Dose, and even Death Runner. These are like the best tracks, but Reconnect as well has got some good instrumentation. Good ideas, but I think as a whole the album doesn't hold up as well. I give it a 2.5 out of 5, it's alright. We got the new one by the Rolling Stones, Hackney Diamonds. This album was quite big, and I'm quite surprised I didn't review it. I instead reviewed the Blink-182 album from that week, but here we are with the Rolling Stones. It's a good album. I don't really have much to say other than that. I think you just kind of get some good ideas that you would know from the Rolling Stones. I feel like there's elements that kind of remind me of a lot more of their stuff around the 70s and 80s, but they're also playing with a bit more of a modern twinge to it as well. It's good. I do like the guest features as well. I think Elton John's bit is not too bad for Live by the Sword, especially since I haven't really been enjoying Elton John's kind of latest stuff he's put out, because I feel like his voice is pretty much going, but I don't think it's too bad here. And Sweet Sounds of Heaven having Lady Gaga and Stevie Wonder, it was interesting. I'd probably say it might be my least favourite, but it's not bad either. And Paul McCartney also features on Bite My Head Off, which, yeah, I think that's probably one of the best tracks on the album, and I'm not a big Paul McCartney fan, so yeah, it's interesting. I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5. I'm not too strong on it, but, you know, for a Rolling Stones album, it's probably one of the best we've had in a while. I was going to actually review this one as a separate video, but I did delete it. We're going to be talking about Blur, the Ballad of Darren's entry, and it's a good album, but I will say I wasn't as big on it as I wanted to be. The singles were the standout tracks in my opinion, when you had St. Charles Square being just this amazing upbeat energy track from Blur. Then you got some softer ones like Barbaric and The Narcissist being some really good singles as well. I probably say the best stuff to me is The Rabbi and The Swan. I think these are the best ones on the record, and they're deluxe tracks, I believe, but nonetheless, I think the album has got a continuous flow, and when it comes to Damon Albarn's bands for 2023, I will give this one to Gorillaz and say that Gorillaz Cracker Island is the more interesting album, but the lows on this one isn't quite as low. It's a 3 for me. I got recommended SYLOSIS, A Sign of Things to Come, from an employee at my local HMV. I really enjoyed this record, and I think it was a really nice change of pace for a lot of the heavier stuff I've been listening to. So this is a band that dabbles in thrash metal and melodic death metal, and I love the combination. It works beautifully, and they still are kicking ass. This album is fantastic. Deadwood is literally an amazing track, following all the way down to A Godless Throne. This is a good album. I'd be giving it a 3.5 out of 5. I definitely recommend this one. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our first quickfire round, because Guided by Voices, they work in let's just say they release a shitload of albums every single time frame. I mean, in the last since 2020 they have actually released 11 albums, so yeah, let's start off with the first one of this year, La La Land. It's a 2.5 out for me. It's kind of whatever. There's some good ideas, but I think the later half of the album is a little bit weak. I don't really care for it. Welsh Paul Frillies, I don't really care much for this one. I personally think it's just a rinse repeat similar stuff to the previous album. It's not that interesting to me. I don't really get the appeal to this one. It's a 2 for me, honestly. And Nowhere to Go But Up is, I think it's probably the most interesting one. It's a little bit different from the rest. It's a bit softer, but I do like some of the melodies, and it makes it at least like bearable for at least some half of the album. So I give it a 2.5 out of 5, and that is the quick round. Fucking hell, that is free. We got the new one by The Damned, Darkadelic. So the heaviness that we had known, or at least the more lively sound from The Damned, is not necessarily as present, but you still have some great tracks nonetheless. I think the singles are probably the highlight. I just love the zaniness and just the fun ideas they have into tracks like Beware of the Clown. I think Bad Weather Girl is also a pretty fun one, and I even like You're Gonna Realise, which just a lot of these tracks are stand out. I think the second half isn't as good. The album's more front loaded, but there's still fun on there with tracks like From Your Lips being a fun one as well. It's a good album. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. I think, despite it's not necessarily the Damned that we know, I think they still have a pretty good sound here, and I personally enjoy it. And also, I did hear almost every song from this record live when I went to see the Damned back in April. It's quite surprising they pretty much played almost everything from this album, but it was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. Next we got the new one by Metallica, 72 Seasons. I didn't get to review this one until now, and yeah, it's fine, I guess. The album has got some really good instrumentation I do quite like. 72 Seasons is an example of a riff that I do quite enjoy, but I just find a lot of the writing just to kind of be whatever. I think with this album the problem is that you just want to go into some of the songs, and I think the best enjoyment is to experience the songs on its own, because when you're going into the album, not a lot comes out of it. I just feel like there's not really much to this. It's fine for what it is, but I don't really see myself ever thinking I want to go back to this album again. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5 because there's some good ideas, but as a whole it's just not really that exciting, to be honest. After 6 years, Rancid has made a comeback with their brand new album Tomorrow Never Comes, which to me it kind of feels like them trying to do a modern take on Outcome the Wolves. I haven't really listened to all of their discography, but I can definitely see some of the ideas from that coming back. However, I do feel like a lot of this is just rinse repeat the same stuff. There's not as much variety. There is like some songs that do stand out though. Magnificent Rogue is one of the top ones. I would also say Eddie the Butcher, and I do even like the single Tomorrow Never Comes. There's some good songs, but overall it's, it's just a bunch of rapid fire shorter songs that just go straight into the next one. And I don't mind that formula, but I feel like because there's a little bit more just song direction within the earlier records, having some space for longer songs to push out more creative ideas, I just felt like this is just, release as many as you can in a short amount of time. It's good, but in my opinion I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5. I kind of wish there was a little bit more to it. We got the new one by Crown the Empire, Dogma. Unfortunately I did not like this one. I think the problem with it stems from, it kind of feels like a heavier continuation from Southern Sky, which isn't too bad. I find this just to be kind of the, oh hey, let's do a Bring Me the Horizon, very sound-esque record, and a lot of metalcore bands will dive into that direction, but I find Crown the Empire's take here just have some pretty weak stuff. I found the production not to be quite as good, to be honest. I felt the mixing was a little weird, but the other thing is I just don't really find many of the songs really stand out. I think the only thing that actually really enticed me was seeing Courtney LaPlante from Spirit Box feature, and I felt her feature was pretty wasted, to be honest. It's probably still the best song, but it didn't really have much to say. I think a lot of it is just kind of your average Crown the Empire, where when you get to the better material on the record, it's nothing zany, it's nothing new to me, honestly. I just think it's kind of a rinse repeat with some weak elements to their discography. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. We have the new one by The Word Alive. This is Hard Reset. I wasn't really even considering reviewing this whatsoever until I saw the features when the album got announced. The fact that this had the popular Bad Omens, Loveless, Escape the Fate, From First to Last, and one of my personal favourite bands in the new scene, in Normandy, featuring on this record, that kind of what interested me into it. Now, I don't think the album's bad, but in terms of what I think The Word Alive were, I think they had a stronger sound originally, and anything since Monomania I've kind of been falling off a little bit. Hard Reset does kind of bring it in some elements that the album does, and that I appreciate. You got some cleaner riffs, some better just some better construction of the songs. I feel like the way that they're crafted feels a lot stronger, but at the same time I find a lot of it just to kind of be like rinse repeat, similar stuff we've heard before. It's fine, but when it comes to a lot of the metalcore albums this year, this is probably one of the weaker ones we've had. Yeah, I'm just gonna give this one a 2.5 out of 5. It's not bad, but I don't really see myself going straight into it. We've got a new one by the grindcore band Cattle Decapitation with TERRASITE. This album I prefer over Ghost Atlas. I think this is a pretty strong direction, and I think this album is just consistently fun. There's a lot of elements that I think really in nicely. The prog elements are fantastic, and with tracks like The Insignificance, We Are Young, and even Just Another Body, it's just a fun overall vibe. I love the Donald Duck screens on this as well. It's a brilliant addition to this album. It's fun. TERRASITE I'm going to give a 3.5 out of 5. It is definitely a good album. We got the new one by Metal Church, Congregation of Annihilation. I completely missed this one, and actually in my albums I want to see for 2024 video that I'm working on, I even accidentally mentioned I'm looking forward to a new record, but I think that was this one. So yeah, 2023, Metal Church are bringing a more fresh feeling to the sound, and it's interesting. I think it's a nice take, and it works quite well. It's nothing incredible in my opinion. I think throughout the 10 tracks it's good, but it's nothing that I think truly feels like Metal Church pushing their best stuff. But I think the thrash direction is something I quite enjoyed, to be honest. I quite like a little bit of thrash, and I think this was a nice change of pace. This is a good album. I give it a 3 out of 5. We have the new one by the pop-punk rock band Hot Milk. I didn't actually know this band existed until a few months ago, then I decided to listen to the album, and yeah, it's fine. I think for a debut album it does have some strengths, but it also has some weaknesses. The writing on some of the songs is just a little bit jarringly weak, like with Alice Cooper's Pool House. I like the aesthetic, but I think the writing is just a little bit juvenile for what it is, but then again, I kind of see what they're going for as well. I like this overall album, but I'm not crazy on it. The pop idea to blend into the rock is cool, and I do like some of the uncleans here and there. There's a little essence of emo on a bunch of these tracks. It's a fine album. For a debut like this, it's interesting, and it is certainly unique. I'll give them that. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5. Narrowhead, the shoegaze alt metal band, had released a new album earlier this year, Moments of Clarity, which I only got around to listening to now, and it is a pretty solid shoegaze record. The first half delves into kind of the more softer, dreamier feel, while the second half, it does embellish a little bit of heavier ideas, especially with tracks like Gearhead and Flesh and Solitude, which adds a little bit of unclean vocals here and there, and then with tracks like Softer Touch, the final one has got a lot more of an electronic over aesthetic, which I like the little balance. I think the first half kind of feels a little too similar at times, but I do like the ideas, and you can definitely tell there's inspiration from artists like Hum and Deftones within it. I'll give this one a 3.5 out of 5. So we got the first of 2 albums by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, titled Petrodragonic Apocalypse, or Dawn of the Eternal Night, and Annihilation of Planet Earth and the Beginning of Merciless Damnation, is the first album. There's another one called The Silver Chord I will get to in a moment. This record is awesome though. I think for what they bring into these just fun elements, the kind of little things that get you off guard, throw you off guard as well, like Flamethrower, the ending just kind of having this little electronic kind of cool little synth, or whatever you want to call it, just playing around as Motor Spirit. It's been repeated, which is the title track, and I just love how well the tracks link to each other. Seeing some lyrics being brought back again, like Vile Smile, and even Gia Monster just kind of being referenced in Dragon as well. I think this album is really fun, and this is my first album from King Gizzard I've ever listened to, so yeah, I'll take that as a good thing. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. We also have another one by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, titled The Silver Chord. Unlike the previous album, Petrodragonic Apocalypse, this one is more on the electro-pop side. It's quite different, and more or less it just kind of feels like a little side project from their main projects. It's something that the band often does, where they release numerous albums a year, and this is an example. Still good. I like the ideas. I think there's some pretty good grooves. The synths sound nice, and especially on tracks like Swan Song and Gilgamesh, there's definitely some enjoyment to be found with this. I wouldn't say it's that crazy good. It's not really anything that feels refreshing and unique in terms of the electro-pop genre, but for King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard spin, I think it's alright. I give it a 2.5 out of 5. We next got the new album by The Ocean, Holocene, which I think this was around the point I just started doing the separate album reviews. I think it was the Sleep Token one was my first, and this came out the same day as that. I think it's a really good album, honestly. I think when you start off with pre-Boreal and then you go into Boreal, you kind of get this, you kind of get the softer side, which I think I enjoy, just how experimental this one feels. And then pushing into the heavier stuff once you hit Atlantic onwards, I'm really enjoying how diverse this record is. I really enjoy Unconformities as well. I think Karen Park has a good kind of like feature on this. She starts off as the voice you hear towards the start, which kind of gives me a little bit of like a Muse feel in terms of her vocal delivery, but then you kind of just go into the heavier stuff and on this track, and I think it's really sick. I think this album is really good. I'll give it a 4 out of 5. I definitely should have checked it out sooner. Currents, The Death We Seek is a good album. I quite enjoyed this one, with tracks like So Alone, Guide Us Home. I generally like the balance of this one. I think compared to the previous record, The Way It Ends, which was also a good album, I will say this is a much preferred direction, and probably the strongest of the 3 albums we have from Currents at the moment. Pretty good record, I recommend it if you want some heavy, fun bangers. This is a 3.5 out of 5 for me. Next we got the new one by the American hard rock band Otherwise with GAWDZILLIONAIRE, which, I'm going to be honest, this album isn't really that good. The mixing just feels so off that it's quite quiet for a lot of the parts, so where it should be at least a little bit louder, it doesn't. It just kind of loses the impact when you have this weird mixing, and even so, the songs just don't really feel that great in my opinion. It just kind of feels like they're going for a more arena rock, kind of butt rock direction, which I know some people don't mind. I don't think that's a terrible idea, but with this, I just don't think any of the songs actually land. It's kind of a weak record in my opinion. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. Black Stone Cherry has released a new record, Screaming at the Sky, and I just don't really vibe with the band, especially since there's not really much change compared to their signature sound. They often have the formula of "it worked, so continue with it." It's kind of something that a bunch of bands like Theory of a Dead Man have been doing, and it's a little jarring. Screaming at the Sky is fine, but I think even the mixing's a little bit weird as well. It's just not really anything I really want to go back into, and there's nothing that's necessarily terrible either. I think the songs are fine, but it's just a repeated, recycled formula that doesn't really give you anything new to work with. It's just a new record by the band. There's nothing more I can really say about that. It's a 2 out of 5 for me. There's been a lot of metalcore this year, and one I've missed is Holofront's new record, The Fear of Letting Go, which I thought originally wasn't that good, but I went back into it, and I don't think it's a bad album necessarily. The production sounds pretty good for what it is, and I think it's got some good songwriting when it comes to how punchy the choruses can be. I think the verses are a good build up to it as well. They normally a lot of metalcore bands follow the heavy verses to soft choruses to kind of give you that little punch in a way. It's nice. I think this album, it could be better in my opinion, but compared to Holofront's last record, I'm happy they've gone for a little bit more of a heavy direction. Yeah, that's all I have to say for this one. 3 out of 5. It's good. Next we have a new album by Yes, Mirror to the Sky. This is a prog rock band who basically are legends in the genre, and to be honest, this album's fine. I think for what it's worth, there are some good gold to be had on this one. I think the self-titled track is probably the standout one. I think Mirror to the Sky is just fantastic in just literally creating and putting everything that this album does well into one song. Other than that, it's just kind of fine. I think there's not really anything terrible, there's not really anything weak, but as a whole, it's just not really that strong either. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. Which seems to be quite a bit of the albums on this list, but at least not many of them are really that bad, to be honest. Conquer Divide's new album, Slow Burn, was interesting. I quite enjoyed it. I don't think it's quite as good as their self-titled album, but for a second album, I think it does quite a good direction and continues on the elements I do like. There's a little bit more of a new personality. It's a little bit softer at times. They play with some a little bit more electronic ideas, but overall they still push out some some good metalcore, just some good ideas. I think it's definitely worth it. Definitely worth the listen. I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Greta Van Fleet with Starcatcher. This album has got some horrendous mixing. I don't know who was in charge of it, but it just sounds terrible. It's really hard to hear the lyrics onto this one, just with how drowned out the vocals are into the instrumentation. It's pretty bad. And not to mention, even despite that, I just think this is not really interesting of a record. Like, I thought Fate of the Faithful was fine, and the Indigo Streak, as well as Meeting the Master, are all right tracks, but the only thing that kind of pulled me in was the instrumentation. The only bit that kind of felt concrete enough throughout the record, and the thing that actually didn't sound too bad, but the overall mix is terrible. This album isn't really good anyway. It's kind of a letdown. I'll give this a 2 out of 5. The British indie rock band the REYTONS released their latest album, What's Rock and Roll. After their pretty successful EP, they managed to put them a little bit on the map. This album managed to get their first UK #1 album, which I'm quite surprised, but then again it was quite a slow week as well. It was kind of near the start of the year. This album's fine. I think for an indie rock band it just kind of does what you'd expect them to. You got the guitars, you got the drums that give you that little bit of rock, as well as giving you a little bit of a softer direction as well. Tracks like Little Bastards make the album a little bit more enjoyable. For the most part, I just think it's alright. It's a whatever album for me. It's a 2.5 out of 5. Point North's Prepare for Despair had released as well this year, and this is one that I actually did listen to, but I completely forgot about it, so this is kind of a last minute entry to this video. But yeah, Point North, I think this is the best record they put out. I'm kind of digging the heavier vibes that we're going for here, but at the same time, when it comes to the more pop punk, post-hardcore sort of direction, they're not really breaking new ground. It's very similar stuff. It is something that a lot of bands have delved in, but I think Point North's kind of spin is not too bad, and I think it's giving a little bit more of their own signature to it, but at the same time it's nothing unique or outstanding. I think it's a fine record. I give it a 2.5 out of 5. Just a heads up, the next few reviews I do sound pretty sick. That's because I have caught a bug when recording these, but this is the new one by SQUID, their debut record, My Tadpole Legion. I think it's honestly a really fun grindcore project with a lot of featured artists. That will be Necrogoblicon or just Cancer Christ. There's a lot of fun ideas on this record. It's 18 minutes, 9 tracks, but grindcore tends to have shorter songs for that reason, and I think with SQUID, they're definitely bringing grindcore, or at least helping grindcore kind of push back. This is a fun record, and every track is really good. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. We got the new one by the indie rock band CIRCA Waves. I can't really say I'm a big fan of Never Going Under. I feel like the title track is probably the best the album has to offer, and I feel like what else afterwards is fine. There's nothing that I personally think is terrible on this record, but I don't know. I just feel like, for me, it just kind of comes as one of the more bland indie albums of the year, but still, I think a lot of indie fans will enjoy it, and I can definitely see what they're personally going to enjoy from it. There's some good elements. I think some of the electronics on towards the second half is what kind of lifts that up a bit, but otherwise than that, I just find the first few songs are the highlights, and yeah, I can't really vibe with this one as much. I'll give it a 2 out of 5, to be honest. This is the new one by SEVENDUST called Truth Killer. I think the album's good. I think the problem is kind of, as you go further into it, you kind of see the similar formula, and while the songwriting's good, I think the instrumentation's great, the production sounds all good. I think the songs kind of feel a little bit dull and repetitive around near the end, but I feel like when the heavier stuff like Love and Hate and Fence pick up, that's when the album, I think, kind of continues that drive. It's got some good ideas. I don't think it's that great, honestly, but for a modern SEVENDUST album, for a band that's done, 14 albums now, and being in the new metal scene, I think the electronic elements and just the overall style, I think it works for them. It doesn't sound like they're beating a dead horse here. So it feels like they're just kind of evolving their sound while also keeping true to what people want to see. So I'll give them a 3 out of 5 for that. It's good. I actually forgot to review the From Ashes to New record, and I did listen to it. This album is good, I think, compared to their original or at least some of their earlier works, I have preferred this direction. I don't think it's quite as good as Panic, as I think that's the band with some of the best ideas, but the guitar work still continues on some great ideas, and I think the riffs and the overall vocal performance is great. The songwriting's a little bit cringy at times when I find it a little too whiny, but I overly think this record is good. I give it a 3 out of 5. This new record by Newfound Glory, Make the Most of It, ditches the pop-punk formula and goes for more acoustic rock, which is a very interesting take, and I didn't know that was what they're going for. I think when you kind of write a bit more upbeat tone songs and you want to kind of go for something that feels a little bit more, I guess, heartwarming and softer, then I can kind of get what you're going with, but to me, I don't really think this album's it. There's some good elements to it. I think Mouth to Mouth's probably the highlight track, and I do like Bloom as well. I do like some of the elements they have to offer, but as a whole, I honestly can't really vibe with this one either. At least the instrumentals sound clean, and I like the idea to push this one for a more acoustic sound, but I just don't think it really did it much justice. It's kind of a bland album in my opinion. I'll give it a 2 out of 5. So we got a new side project, one from Ada Rook from Black Dresses, called God Come Poltergeist from the project Crisis Sigil, and for another grindcore artist that I've reviewed for this video, which I haven't really heard prior to this. I was quite impressed with the overall direction they took with this one. I think the industrial sound melding in with some grindcore gives you a very diverse, fun record where you have tracks that kind of stick out amongst each other. Like, you can go into the fast-paced driven tracks like Skybox or Plasmageist, and then you can go into ones with a little bit more of a backbone with a different structure, so it's not just that, like Portal Zero. And God Come Poltergeist, the title track, is just a beast. It just feels like you're playing some boss music. I enjoy the old aesthetic. I think this one works really well. It's a fun album. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. We got a new one by the industrial rock / metal band Filter with The Algorithm, and I didn't know what to expect because I actually never listened to Filter, despite knowing of them for a while. But as I can hear from this record, I'm not a big fan of the production. I feel like sometimes the guitars just either drowned out almost entirely, which is shown in The Drowning, which is ironic, but the vocals either just feel like it's not too loud, or sometimes it feels like it is too loud. Most of the time it just kind of feels like there's elements that's just kind of awkwardly mixed, and the higher notes on tracks like Up Against the Wall, sung in the chorus, is also some of the stuff that I think sounds pretty weak. Richard Patrick isn't my favourite vocalist out there, but the higher tones reached on this one just sound really weak in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of this one, honestly. I give it a 2 out of 5. It's not the worst thing. I think there's some good instrumental ideas, but as a whole it's just a little jarring, just a little bland, just, yeah. So this is one I almost missed, but I actually saw St. Agnes support Skindred for their UK tour, and seeing this pop up, I decided to give Bloodsuckers a listen and put this onto the video. And St. Agnes' new record, Bloodsuckers, is, honestly, I do like it. I like the punk aspect. They got a very vibrant hard rock, just heavy atmosphere, while they experiment as well. So they give you a mixture of tracks like Forever Never, which takes the formula and gives you something a little bit different. And I just like how you can go from tracks like Follow You to Bloodsuckers. The amount of times that you hear fuck in this record alone kind of feels like it's putting Fred Durst up there for competition, and it's pretty interesting to see who comes up on top for saying that the most amount of times. It's a good album. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's pretty unique and fun, and something that I like to see with a bit more done with punk. It experiments quite well and it's fun. I haven't heard about this deathcore act, Year of the Knife, and their new record, No Love Lost, until I heard about the van accident, which actually put all of them into injured condition, and then there was a pretty critical condition for the lead vocalist, but apparently they're all recovering, which is nice to hear. And this new record is just some fun deathcore that I think works pretty well. It's got the length of an album, sound like grindcore to me, but I like how it's just shorter, just snappier metalcore with just some heavy The vocals work nicely. It's a good album. I'm not crazy on it, but I think the Year of the Knife it's a good record for 8 out of 5. We got one that I completely missed by Chelsea Grin at the Deathcore Act with their latest album, Suffer in Heaven. It is great, I enjoy it, it's just filled with surprises on every single track, and that's something that I find a lot of more modern deathcore doesn't really do as much. So the fact that they have sorts like guitar solos on the Path to Suffering, or just some really good breakdowns throughout, and just some really good pig squeals as well. I think the overall blend of how they do some amazing growls to just some complete uncleans entirely, it's great. I think this record's pretty good. It's a 4 out of 5 for me. I quite enjoyed it. So that wraps up this video. There has been a bunch of albums I missed, so I'm happy I managed to cover them here. There has been some that I also haven't gotten around to reviewing. I don't think I'll be reviewing them in the end. We had one by Dying Fetus I was planning to record, but since it's been a lot and I haven't had much time to be editing because I've been doing some part-time work experience as well as just other stuff and preparing for Christmas, sorting that stuff out, I haven't really had as much time to focus on this. So there's not going to be much reviews coming out after now. There's going to be one for the new Health record which comes out on the 7th, I believe, or at least next week, and then there's going to be one for Atrio. If there is anything else I review and cover, it will be up there, but I don't think there's going to be much else. I think the reviews are kind of come to an end for this year, but there will be some content still. I'm going to be doing the worst albums of the year video and the best albums of the year video, so don't worry, we're going to be having them, and I might also be doing a video talking about the albums coming out next year that I'm either looking forward to or albums that might be coming out, so we'll have to see. I might collab with someone on that, we'll just have to see how that goes. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and yeah, Christmas is almost here.